On today's show, I'm joined by Saad Yousuf of The Athletic and The Ticket here in Dallas-Fort Worth, and we're just going to talk about all things Dallas Stars in regards to the first 11 games of the season, because there's a lot to break down in what has been a roller coaster of a season so far for the Dallas Stars. So you're going to want to keep it dialed in here for a Tuesday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, and it is Tuesday, November 9th. And the Dallas Stars are off today, so no game to cover, no game to recap, but I am joined by a very special guest, Saad Yousuf of The Athletic and The Ticket radio station for sports here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Saad, how are you doing today? Thanks for being on the show.
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm actually not gonna lie. I'm in my pajamas right now because I just I just got home after an 8-day road trip all through Canada. So yeah, the Stars left Vancouver this morning. I also left in the afternoon and literally just got home like less than an hour ago. So yeah, just getting back acclimated. It's a big homestand coming up now. So yeah, we'll be here for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are absolutely a trooper for hopping on the show, fresh off the plane, fresh, coming back from Canada. Not a short trip by any means.
Yeah.
So we really do appreciate having you here on the show. And like I said, kind of at the top, a lot to talk about. And what has been just a roller coaster of emotions for the Stars this season, with overtime wins, overtime losses, and honestly, just kind of a lot of shattered expectations, if you will. And kind of saw the first thing I want to talk about kind of in today's show, talking about expectations. I think there were a lot of high expectations for this team, both, within the organization, but also for members of the media and even for the fan base. And I would think it's fair to say that the Stars haven't necessarily lived up to the hype so far. But what kind of surprised you the most about the Stars this season, based on what we thought this team was going to be in the preseason? Kind of what has surprised you the most through 11 games so far this season?
I think the lack of offense. I mean, I know like people will say like, the pessimists will say, well, that shouldn't be surprising. Like we saw, I know last year there was just so many injuries with Tyler Seguin, with Alexander Radulov, with just guys being in and out. Rope Hintz was banged up the whole year. Like everything just felt out of sorts. And you can say whatever you want about the just, the general vibe of what the team has been. But I just thought that, they had 9 forwards that were like inked in coming into training camp. There wasn't even a competition for those 9 guys. And of those 9, like, you had guys like, you had the top line of Hintz, Robertson, Pavelski. You had Ben, Seguin, Radulov. You had Gurianov. You had Kiviranta. You had Faksa. Like those 9 guys, like, I mean, I know Faksa has been like, a checking line center, but like, he's capable of playing offense. Gurianov was the team's leading scorer 2 years ago. Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski lit it up last year when Hintz was limited. Ben, Seguin, Radulov, yeah, they're as a line, they're not what they were, but as individual players, like you still thought they had something left in the tank, and they just, that entire operation has not really been what it's supposed to be. I mean, Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski, that line looks good, but they're still not producing. Ben, Seguin, Radulov, I mean, that's just living in 2015 at this point. That line hasn't looked the way that it should. They've had little like, just outbursts of success, but like for the most part, that line hasn't looked great. So I think the offense, the forwards, is kind of what surprised me the most, of just like, how far below expectations they've been so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like especially in the earlier games, especially on that kind of season opening road trip for the first 4 games, the offense was very, very lacking. And I feel like maybe they picked it up a little bit, despite, this road trip in Canada not necessarily yielding the best results all across the board. I feel like, maybe the offense maybe kind of found some rhythm, especially on the power play. The power play has been very, very effective the past several games. And how do you think the Stars can continue to improve the offense? Because I definitely agree that that's probably one of the most surprising and also most disappointing parts of the season so far, the offense, because they're getting quality looks at the net. I think we've seen that in games, but also have heard it from Rick Bowness in press conferences and team players, in their press conferences as well. But what besides, continuing to put the puck on the net, do you think the Stars can do to improve their offensive, efficiency across these next few games?
It's hard to say. I mean, like they've kind of done everything that they possibly could. They played, they've kept that top line together. Once Jason Robertson came back, they've tried Ben Sagan-Radulov, then they split them up, then they brought them back together, then they split them up again. Now they're back together again, and then they've had Denis Gurianov play with Jamie Benn. Now they're having him play with Radek Faksa. Like they've done everything they could in that forward position, and like in that forward spot. And I think what's like the biggest thing is the offense, and I wrote about this a few games ago, like the offense isn't dead. And I think if the offense was dead, if the forwards group were just not generating anything, that's where the biggest concern would be. I would still say it's a concern right now. But if like Rope Hintz, I don't know what's happened, what kind of voodoo is going on there, but he has to be one of the most unluckiest players in the NHL. And with him, like it's not one of those things where unlucky as in like he's not doing it. He's doing everything he possibly can, and he's like it just so happens like we've talked about in the past of like breakaways landing right in the goalie's chest. Like he's not doing that. Like when he has breakaways, the goalies are usually making really good saves. He's hitting posts. He's hitting just everything but the net, and so. I think that's the thing is like some of these things you just, I know fans will hate to hear this, but you just have to give it a little bit more time because at the end of the day, like as we speak today, it's been 11 games. And so like there's still 70 something left. And so I would say like they still have plenty of time to turn it around. But they're just going to have to get something going. But in terms of combinations and stuff, like, I'm not sure that, they've been trying everything. They even brought Thomas Harley up. And Thomas Harley's been playing with Miro. Then he's not playing with Miro. Like they're doing everything line combination wise possible to make the personnel work. It just hasn't worked yet.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard. Either hosting a podcast or writing articles, whatever it is, to continue to tell the fans and continue to tell ourselves, that eventually the Dallas Stars, if they keep doing what they're doing, will eventually find some consistency on offense. Because, like you said, at the end of the day, a lot of their shots, not just Rupe Hintz, but the team in general, taking a lot of high quality shots. We saw even the other night in Vancouver, Jamie Benn had a really nice look at the net. I think it was in the first before Pavelski scored the first goal of the game, and that Demko just made one of the best saves that you'll see all season. Yeah. And so it's just a mix of fantastic goalie play and, like you said, maybe just a little bit of unluckiness. And speaking of goalies, what have you make of the goalie performances by both Braden Holtby and Anton Hedoben so far this season? Who has kind of been maybe the premier guy so far this season, and what's been a pretty inconsistent year in the crease, I feel like, for the Stars so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Braden. I mean, Braden Holtby, like when you look at the load that he's playing, he's playing number one goalie. Like the amount of starts that he has, the cadence that he's playing with, and he has a .924 save percentage right now. It's not, it's not like top in the league, but he's among the league's best. And a lot of that has to do with the hot start. Like I know a lot of people will say, like, he started off looking like he might be the Vezina guy again. But then he slowed down a little bit recently, but I wouldn't say goalie play is the concern here. And I don't know that. And the reason why also is like, I'm not sure what else you could do there. Jake Ottinger, yeah, like he looked good in the AHL. He's also had his moments of struggling in the AHL, and he needs the development of like actually working on his skills. Something that you can't really do that effectively at the NHL level because you're so focused on, as Anton Hedoben is a good example of this, he's just focused on stopping the puck from getting in the net by all means necessary. Whatever, like, and that's the great thing about goaltending coach Jeff Reese as well, is that he caters to his goaltenders. And so like, and the trick with that though is that you have to have something to cater to. So like Ben Bishop was established, like that he is very film oriented. He wants to watch the film. He wants to play it off like that. Anton Hedoben, he's more of just getting the crease and he's moving around everywhere. He's doing all this kind of stuff. And you can work with that as a goalie coach. Braden Holtby, same thing. Established guy, knows what he's doing. With Jake Ottinger, you really want him to mold into something before you really put him through the fire. So In terms of the NHL crease, though, I do think Braden Holtby has been the starter. He's been a good starter. Like, he hasn't been great, he hasn't been bad, and I think Stars fans kind of have to get used to that a little bit after 2 years of just phenomenal goaltending play in the 2018-19 and 2019-20 seasons with Bishop and Hedoben. Bishop in that first season, 2018-19, was a Vezina finalist. Like, he was fantastic. And then that second season, he was still pretty good, but Anton was even better. And then Anton went on that Stanley Cup final run, which was pretty good as well. So I think Stars fans have gotten used to that a little bit. But that's not what most of the league is used to anyway. So I think what they're looking at now is pretty good goaltending.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think the Stars fans have been almost maybe spoiled, like you said, with the performances of Bishop and Hedoben. And also, I think, too, especially Braden Holtby's credit, there's been several times this season where his teammates aren't necessarily doing him too many favors. And Hedoben as well, we even saw a little bit in Vancouver, either, turnovers lead to breakaways where there's a 2-on-1 or, an uncontested shot. Yeah. So, some of the numbers that you see for either goalie, hard to pin all of those numbers or bad performances on them because, it's a team game at the end of the day. But we will have more to talk about later on in today's episode with Saad Yousuf of The Athletic and The Ticket here in Dallas-Fort Worth. But before we jump into more talking points, I want to take a quick moment and say thank you to one of the sponsors of today's episode, and that is DirecTV. I want to tell you about a simple way that you can get all the entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Jumping back into today's episode with Saad Yousuf of The Athletic, talking a little bit about the Dallas Stars through their first 11 games of the season, talking about shattered expectations and talking about the team as a whole, and kind of taking more deep dive into the roster. Saad, who has been a guy in your eyes that, maybe was kind of, I don't know, a sleeper on the team or a guy that maybe not a whole lot of people were talking about that has taken you by surprise for the Stars this season? Maybe a guy that wasn't garnering a whole lot of attention through training camp, but has, played well despite, what the team record might indicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't be upset with the way Luke Glendening and Michael Raffle have played. They were signed to be fourth line, just kind of throwaway players, and both of them have had moments of playing well. I mean, the tricky thing to that question that you're asking also is that, to be honest, like, every single Star had expectations. There weren't a lot of guys who you didn't expect. I mean, I guess you could throw Thomas Harley in there and Braden Holtby. Like, you didn't know, like, coming out of camp, you didn't know if Braden Holtby and Anton Hedoben, like, if you even had a number one goalie. It kind of seemed like, there was a chance that they'd kind of just wing it and go with the hot hand and kind of see where it goes. But Braden Holtby, the fact that he has, like, even if he hasn't been lights out, the fact that he's been good enough to be a legit number one goaltender, that's pretty surprising. And also not overly surprising given his history as a Stanley Cup champion, as a Vezina winner. But yeah, I mean, I think Luke Glendening, I think Michael Raffle, I think Radek Faksa, honestly, like, he's, for the first few games of the season, for the first part of the season, he was the team's best forward. And yes, a lot of that is because of how bad the other guys were. But also Radek, he was not healthy at all last year. He was playing with, he didn't even have like a wrist. And so, like, he was playing with one wrist last season. So he's healthy and he was playing a lot better. I think that's definitely, and then I think now recently Thomas Harley, like, I know there's a lot of expectations around the kid, but for him to get the call up, and then for his first he started off with Yanni Hakanpää, and then at the end of his first game, the third period, he played with Miro. His entire second game, he played with Miro. That was honestly probably the most surprising, I would say, of any player I've been because this season. Because, like, honestly, like, yeah, playing with Miro, like, he's great and he can make your job a lot easier, but you have to be able to keep up with Miro. Like, Like
Yeah.
Miro's an elite hockey player. Like you have to be able to keep up with his skating, which is, I would say Miro's skating is top 5, maybe top 10 in the league. Like he's that good of a skater. And then his hockey IQ. And so like the fact that Harley could even do that was pretty shocking to me. I wasn't shocked that he got the call up. I was shocked that he was able to play and hang with Miro. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, super fun to watch, and I think that's just gonna. I mean, that can only benefit him as a young player in this league. Is it was encouraging to see that he was able to keep pace with him, and he'll continue to do that, and I'm sure he'll continue to learn things from Miro, because Miro has easily far away probably been the best player on the Stars roster, especially defenseman, and you could argue for the entire team.
Oh, for the entire team, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He I feel like he's a guy that had high expectations, and he has met those expectations so far. Really, no debate there. But overall, again, and we kind of touched on a little earlier, talking about the Vancouver game. But one of the issues for Dallas over the past few games, especially, has been penalties. And penalties are kind of a weird thing because, as a fan or as someone who's watching the game, it's easy to just say the solution is to be more disciplined. And especially a team like this with how many veterans they have on this team, you would think that wouldn't be as much of an issue. But here we are, a day removed from a game in Vancouver where basically the game was lost because of Dallas's inability to stay out of the penalty box. So what, 30 penalty minutes, I think, if my math is correct, from the last 3 games in Canada, accumulated by the Stars. And you just can't win hockey games like that. I think, they came away with 1 win on that Canadian road trip. But what's a way besides, just saying, be more disciplined, that the Stars can kind of clean up their act and record less penalty minutes? Because I think it's really going to be kind of their Achilles heel if they keep that up.
Yeah, I think there's a line between playing desperate and playing sloppy, and you have to, and like you said, like for this team with how many veterans they have, it's unacceptable to be taking as many penalties. I mean, I know the Vancouver game is going to get thrown into the spotlight because it's the latest game and it's the one they lost 6-3, but really that Calgary game, they won in overtime. But go back and look at that third period. They took 3 penalties in like a 5-minute span and almost threw that game away because of that. So they came out with a win, so that one doesn't get, scrutinized as much, but that was not great either. And then the other thing is, and, I wrote about this in my latest piece, is just it's the guys that are taking the penalties. It's Ryan Suter taking 2 in the last 2 games between Calgary and Vancouver. Ryan Suter taking 2, Yanni Hakanpää taking 2, Radek Faksa, Miro Heiskanen, like these guys, they're guys that they need to be disciplined, but also they're on the penalty kill. So when you lose guys like that, like this isn't losing Denis Gurianov and then now you have to go kill a penalty. It's like Miro, like for example, against Vancouver, Miro took that first penalty. The Canucks, who had an absolutely inept power play, were over their last 17 before that. Miro's sitting in the box and they scored 6 seconds into that power play. Now, if Miro is on the penalty kill, does that happen? Probably. I would argue no. Like, I mean, Miro's that good. So, I think those are the kind of things that, like, in these players, these veterans, these named players, like, and look, guys like a guy like Miro, like he takes a penalty once in a blue moon. It's something. Yanni Hakanpää has taken a penalty almost every game. Like that can't happen. Ryan Suter taking 2 and 1 for a cross check, that like, those things can't happen. So it really is just finding that balance of being able to play desperate, but really just staying disciplined as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, like you said, a pretty bad power play from Vancouver on Sunday. And so you can only imagine, what would happen if, we played a team that, has a really good, inconsistent power play unit. The score could end up being much worse. And especially, when we're missing guys, like you said, Miro and, even guys like Luke Glendening, who aren't necessarily defensemen, but guys that you would want on the ice to help kill penalties. I mean, it just hurts the team. And especially, if Dallas, they're looking to make the playoffs, obviously still a long ways away from the playoffs, but a team that hopefully can be in contention from there. That's something that can absolutely kill you in a playoff series. And, you can lose playoff series for reasons like that by taking too many penalties and getting down on special teams. And so hopefully that's something Dallas can kind of look to clean up, on this 3-game homestand against Detroit, Philadelphia, and Nashville. And I know Nashville is their next game. But yeah, should be interesting to see how the Stars, look to fix that over these next few weeks. More talking points coming up next. on today's episode. But before we jump into the last little bit of the show, I want to take a moment and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is BetOnline. BetOnline is back and better than ever with the new web interface for the start of basketball season, with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Closing out today's episode of Locked On Stars with Saad Yousuf of The Athletic, writing for the Dallas Stars. Kind of the last talking point I want to talk about, I talked about before the last ad read, that the Dallas Stars will be at home for their next 3 games. And just kind of a question that kind of ran through my mind a little earlier is, how much of Dallas's troubles do you think could be attributed to maybe the fact that they've played, 8 of their first 11 games on the road? How much of a factor do you think that has played in some, whether it's penalties, lack of offense, or just overall on the team? How do you think that has affected this team in this young season so far?
I'll say it's a factor, but I'm not going to excuse that. I mean, we just came off of a season where the schedule was an excuse the entire season. And by the way, last season, a legitimate excuse. I mean, that schedule was brutal last year, and anybody that doesn't take that into consideration just isn't looking at the whole picture. But road games, you look at the last couple of weeks, there was, it was before that game they played against Ottawa at home. They had 2 days off before that. They had, I think, 3 days off after that. They played Calgary on Thursday. They had 2 days off after Calgary, then played Vancouver. Now they have 2 days off again, and before they play Nashville. Playing on the road isn't ideal, but these are, again, this is the oldest roster in the NHL. These are veteran guys who know how to do these things. I don't think that the road itself, the schedule has not been brutal. They've had a couple of back-to-backs. Maybe they've only had one. I think they've only had one back-to-back. It was that
Boston
second and
Ottawa,
third game. Yeah, Boston, Ottawa. So
right.
it hasn't been a brutal schedule. It's been road heavy for sure, but not really. I don't think that's the reason why they're struggling, because they don't get the last change. Struggles are bigger than getting last change right now. And so I don't think that the schedule. We'll see. I mean, we'll get our answer here. I mean, I think they're at home the rest of the month except for Minnesota. So they have one game at Minnesota, and then other than that, I think rest of November is basically all at home. So.
Yeah, and especially kind of near the back end of November, some big teams coming to town with Edmonton, Colorado. I know those teams for sure, and I know kind of the immediate first 3 that we have before hitting the road again in Minnesota, Nashville, Philadelphia, Detroit. What is something that kind of, and obviously we've talked about a lot of things that the Stars can work on, but what do you think is kind of the point of emphasis for this Dallas Stars team going into this homestand? They're back at home for a pretty extended amount of time. So again, even if there is excuses to be made for being on the road, those are out the window. What is something that you would personally like to see the Stars kind of fine tune, try to perfect while at home in front of the hometown fans?
Yeah, I mean, for the last 3 years, I feel like the answer has been offense. And I think overall in the big picture, scoring goals is definitely that. But I'm not going to go that route here. I'm going to say before they even fix the offense, they need to find their discipline, because this is a team that at their best, they're capable of winning 2-1 hockey games. Fans may not like it, but that's kind of just the way that this team is right now. And they're capable of doing that. We saw it against Pittsburgh earlier in the season. Pittsburgh is a good team, and they were able to contain that offense, which was scoring 4 or 5 goals per game at that point. It was a very young in the season, but still, but you can't do it when you're on the penalty kill for half of a period. More than half the period, 6 penalties. They were that's 12 minutes just out the window where you have no chance at offense. So, for as much as they struggle offensively, you have to give yourself a chance to play. And they're basically, ironically, because they can't play 60 minutes of hockey, they're not even playing 60 minutes of 5-on-5 hockey. Like just look at the Vancouver game. Like your offense is not good enough to score enough goals in 2.5 periods while giving the other team 12 minutes of an extra man. And by the way, like a minute and 11 seconds of like 5-on-3, which they somehow killed that.
Yeah.
But still like 3 other power plays. So, but like they can't do that. So I would say the biggest thing they have to do, if they aren't on the PK and they're just playing their game, like it'll get dicey. But I think they can still pull out some of these wins while they found the offense. But if they're staying on the penalty kill, this team doesn't have a chance.
Yeah, I agree. They really just need to flip the script, because whenever it's the opposite and they have the man advantage, they seem almost unstoppable. It's just they're not, getting as many of those opportunities as they're giving the opposition. And yeah, I totally agree. I think, the Stars, as much as it might be to the dislike of fans, and it stresses everyone out watching the games. I think you look at the first home game against LA, and I think those are going to be, a lot of the games that the Stars end up winning this season. Hopefully they're not all in overtime. But those kind of back and forth grinded out games where, it doesn't necessarily feel out of reach for either team. But that just might be, the Dallas Stars identity this season, is giving the fans heart attacks every single night, which I guess is better than getting blown out at the end of the day. But right. I'm super excited to see how this team performs. And, I think that they'll hopefully be a little bit, re-energized, rejuvenized, if you will, in front of, the hometown fans for 3 games in a row against some competition that's good, but I think games that, they can definitely compete in and win. So super excited to see how the team performs. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. You can find the show and myself on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis and the show at Locked On Stars. Saad, if you want to take a moment, you can tell the listeners where they can find you on social media, as well as, where they can find your work on The Athletic and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. Like on Twitter at Saad Yousuf 126. I think you see it right there under my name. That's where I'm, follow me for all my work. And then also, at The Athletic, subscribe. And, hopefully we have a lot of fun stuff coming up regardless of how the team does. So I'm excited about the work that we're going to have there. So definitely follow along there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys go check Saad out. He does a lot of great work covering the Dallas Stars. And be sure to tune into tomorrow's episode as we preview Wednesday's game against the Nashville Predators. Should be a lot of fun. Nick from Locked On Predators will be on the show with me. So we'll get to talk, about both teams and take a deep dive into both teams' rosters and talk about the matchups to be on the lookout for. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars, and we will see you back here tomorrow.